a breach in the US averages about $10.2 million. And if you add in the concept of shadow AI, it goes up by almost $700,000.
If you give a letter score, for instance, if you say that, hey, your vendor has an F score, what does it mean?
When we get that pushback, no, we're good with questionnaires. How do you fight that? Greetings and salutations, one and all. Welcome to today's episode of Third Party. Today, we're going to talk about the big lie that your third-party risk teams are suffering from. And I'm super excited to be here today with my colleagues Bob and Ferhat. And so let's call it out, right? Most third-party risk programs these days are being run based on arbitrary scores with zero context. People are being asked to make decisions when they don't really understand the decisions they're being made. They don't understand their risks. All they really understand is you're a B, you're a C, you're a D. Why is that a problem, Bob?
Because it's always wrong. That's the biggest problem. It's an interesting thing. It's how I got into this company. It's how I got into this world, was looking at understanding, where the risks are and how you convey that to people. But the problem is most people in information security have no idea about business. They only know their technical things. And so they kind of look for the easy button. And what's the easiest way to do it that's meaningless, that says we've done our job and we've covered our butts, and we think we're doing a good job, but we're really not.
But you said, that's always wrong. Is it though? I mean, like the scores, they have a place in third-party risk management, right? That gives you the general cybersecurity posture of a vendor so that you can prioritize your vendors, because you are dealing with thousands of vendors at some point. But without the context, that's the wrong part, right? If you give a letter score, for instance, if you say that, hey, your vendor has an F score, what does it mean really? Does it mean that even the script kiddies can do something to them?
Well, F is for fabulous, right?
What it means is they looked at my report card for writing when I was in elementary school. That's what it means.
Yeah.
No, I disagree. So scores, I don't think are very valuable. They have some value in certain concepts and processes in third party when you're comparing apples to apples. Let's say you're going to onboard, you're looking at a group of third parties to compare them, to see who you're going to buy. They're good then. But other than that, I don't think they are, because they tend to give you a feeling of comfort. You guys are a B. Yeah, we can use those. Those guys are good, because, B's good, right? You got to be in school. Other folks, B is horrible. We have to be an A. So it's really, it's an issue of comfort as opposed to giving you valuable information to make good decisions. Because third-party risk management should be about making good decisions. And I don't think scores let you do that.
I mean, I agree that it might give you the false sense of security, and by itself they are not sufficient. I'm not saying that they are unnecessary. We might need them, but you need to add additional stuff, additional risk intelligence on top of that score. Otherwise, it's usually the average of averages. It's abstraction of the risk information that are collected, and if you don't know how it is collected and how it is calculated, then it's not useful in that case.
Well, I like what you said, averages of averages. It's like where I grew up, Susquehanna River. The average depth of the river is 3 feet. So you should be safe going out into the river, right? And I've been out there. It's where I used to go with my brother. We would go out bass fishing, wade fishing, and it's average 3 feet, so you're good. The only problem is in the 1800s, they dredged the river in certain places for coal barges. In some places, it's 20 or 30 feet. So you don't see the risk if you're looking at averages, and that's where I think scores are. They're averages, and you don't see those deep trenches where the danger really is. And for me, that's the biggest problem.
And I want to add something. You talked about comfort, and I think it also is about complacency, right? We have a history of, we have this, we've been using it for years, it must be good. But we know, in fact, that is absolutely not the case, right? Einstein's definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. We continue to see tons of breaches through third parties. We continue to see issues with supply chain risk. And we always talk collectively about this outsized impact of cyber, right? Cyber is one risk, but has an outsized impact on anything else. If you get hit with a piece of ransomware, or if somebody steals your data, you can't build product, you can't ship, you can't bill, you can't collect money, you can't advertise. So it's really about getting people to think differently. How do we get them to move? And I think you hit on the concept that I talk about all the time, which is context, right? We have these scores, but what do we do with them? And how do we defend those decisions? And that's where we need to get people to sort of shift and change. It's not just about one thing, it's about that one thing within the context of all of the other intelligence that we have available to us. And in the age of AI, and I know in further episodes we're going to talk about AI because I think it's illegal not to talk about AI these days, but we're going to talk about the fact that we have all this information. What do we do with it, right? Are we overwhelmed? And I think we need to find, you talked about, we talk about education. I was an economics major as an undergrad, and I learned a lot of things that I use on a regular basis. But one thing I learned was about models, right? The more accurate a model is, the harder it is to use. The easier it is to use, the less accurate and precise it is. And we need to figure out how to balance.
The more accurate it is, the more often it's wrong.
Right. Yes. So where have you seen context be brought in and used to make better decisions?
Well, let me start first with that. You said that, we've been in this industry, like we are doing this for a long time. Third-party cyber risk score based on the intelligence collected from cyberspace is not new, right? Sorry, it's new. It's not something that people were doing for a long time. What people were doing is that collecting the questionnaires, putting some maturity levels based on the answers that you collect, and you have some sort of a level that you can work on. It wasn't working. It's still not working, to be honest, because questionnaires at the end, it's the point in time assessment, and it is based on the answers that you collect from the vendor. But the cyber risk scores, based on the intelligence collected from the cyberspace, they added another piece of information that you can use. They are flawed, but that's something new, and we are changing the industry, trying to understand what will be the best option for making decisions, right? And that context comes into the picture, because when you give a score or a letter grade like B, or you are 85 out of 100, as you said, it gives you a false sense of security. When it comes to threats, especially from ransomware groups, they exploit one vulnerability, for instance, on a strict server. And let's say that vendor, they have that problem, but it's just one findings out of thousands of findings. And when you do the average of averages, then they end up with a good grade. If you don't know how that grade calculated, if you don't have that specific piece of information, specific piece of risk intelligence, then you have that false sense of security, and you really need a context over there. That's why, first of all, the scoring should be transparent. You should know how it is calculated. You should know all the contributing factors, and you should also have risk intelligence on top of the scores. So now you have maturity levels based on the questionnaires. You have a cyber risk score based on all the intelligence collected from the cyberspace, and you have point-in-time risk intelligence that might be good to look into.
Well, yeah, and I'm going to shock myself. I'm going to defend questionnaires.
Don't shock yourself, Bob. We don't need to see that.
But at some point, questionnaires were amazing. When before questionnaires, everybody was doing their own thing, and nobody was talking about any common language. So the organization called BITS came up with a common set of questions that allowed people to do those types of assessments, that they were then speaking the same language. The problem, though, was that they were compliance-based, and that's what you're talking about. It's having that additional risk intelligence. If you have to look at the goal of what's the goal of third-party risk management, Is it to approve vendors? Is it to make the company safer? Is it to use the most secure vendors? I don't think that's it. It should be to reduce the risk exposure to our company. And what's the best tools? What are the best things you can use to reduce risk exposure? And like I said, scores, I think, are great during onboarding when you're comparing them for having that qualitative look. But the other factors you're talking about, the context. You mentioned RSI, Ransomware Susceptibility Index. For me, in an ongoing world, as CISO, I want to know what the clear and present danger is. And looking at a score doesn't tell me that. Living here on the East Coast, who remembers Colonial Pipeline? I saw news clips of people going to the gas station with plastic bags to get gasoline, and how good was Colonial Pipeline? What was their risk score? It was actually pretty good, but they fell victim to something very specific that you talked about, that ransomware. So for me, risk scores they have their place, but from an ongoing risk perspective, trying to reduce the risk to our organization, our exposure, there's other factors. It's the intelligence.
And for those of you out there listening, do not put gasoline in a plastic bag. That is very risky. So let me ask you guys a question, right? So we've talked about why this old approach doesn't work. How did we get so comfortable with this? It's pervasive now, and there's a ton of pushback. I mean, we talk to a lot of CISOs collectively, a lot of third-party risk managers collectively, and I feel like the general consensus is we know this is bad, but it's the only option we have. How did we get comfortable with bad as the way we measure this risk?
I wrote an article about chaos and entropy. And I think what happens is, and coming from a world where I've been down in the trenches doing third-party risk management, you have pressures. And the goal of your program should be to reduce risk to your organization, but the reality is that you have to follow those pressures, and those pressures are, what's the policy in your organization? What's management want? And so you're doing a fine, it's a balancing act of doing what you think is right, or following the practices that are in place because, well, your job depends on it. And nobody likes to change things. Most humans are very adverse to change. Entropy, low entropy means a lot of comfort. It's the old cooked in the squat. I don't know if you're familiar with that. You put a frog in comfortable water in a pan, and he sits there. If you throw him in a boiling pot, he'll jump out. But if you put him in that first pot and turn it on slowly, he doesn't realize that he's comfortable. He's cooked. And I think that's where people are today in third-party risk management. They're comfortable, and they don't know that the water's boiling around them. They don't know that all hell's going to break loose soon. But we can't change because, well, that's not what the policy says. That's not what management says.
Right. And there's also a relativistic sort of element to that, right? We talked about it over breakfast and coffee this morning. Like, I spend a lot of my time in Florida where it's kind of hot and humid. You spend your time in Arizona where it's stupidly hot and not humid. And Ferhat's up in Boston where it's both sometimes, right? For you, 100 degrees is not that bad. For me, 100 degrees is hot, right? So it's really about sort of understanding. So let me ask you this, Ferhat. So you come from a data background, right? From an intelligence background, from a research background. From a researcher's perspective, what's your thought on how do we get here where we're stuck with this thing that just doesn't work?
Yeah. I mean, it's in the human nature. If you ask anyone what is the best path, they will say that the best path is the path that you know, right? Yeah. Before the navigations, people only follow the path that they know, right? When we have these navigation devices, we have these, maps applications. We put something, sometimes we trust, but some people, they still don't trust whatever outcomes. And I was one of those people. Once I was going somewhere and the navigation tried to put me in these side roads. I said, like, that's the shortest path. I know that path. It's a highway. I need to go there. But there was traffic accident over there. So I got stuck in the traffic for so long. So I learned to trust, maps application after that.
How many times have you ignored it right? And then you go, oh my God, I can't believe I just did not pay attention.
Yeah,
and you end up sitting in an
exactly.
hour traffic at the George Washington Bridge.
But to come to that conclusion, you need to try the other method. You need to see the differences. Without seeing the differences, without seeing the quality of other method, you will only follow the path. And the other thing is that this is an evolution, right? We started with, before the questionnaires, we didn't have anything with questionnaires. Now we have something. After the questionnaires, we have the scores. Now we have the risk intelligence, continuous risk monitoring. It's an evolution going forward, which is good. It's not bad, but every evolution steps is challenging. So you need to convince people to try the new things. When they try the new things, they will understand that, oh, this is good. This is much better than whatever I have. I think that's the reality that we are facing.
So that's a great point, and I just want to kind of ask a question of both of you guys. So I had a conversation with one of our clients not that long ago, and they said, look, we get that questionnaires need to go away. Questionnaires must die, right? Which we all agree. He said, but my compliance people, my assurance people, my audit people, all they know is questionnaires. How do we get people to think differently? To your point, right? We have this inertia. We have what people are used to. How do we get people to go, you know what? There's a better way to do this. How do we fix that? Well, how do we move toward fixing it? Because I don't think we're going to fix it here today.
His response.
So first, here's my questionnaire swear jar. You have to put $10 in for every time you say questionnaires.
But I didn't swear yet.
Yeah, no, but you said
I'm going to wait till next episode to swear.
That's swear. The problem is how we look at it. We look at questionnaires as Excel spreadsheets. That's what they were, where we're going to ask questions. But when you look at what was the purpose of those questionnaires, the purpose of the questionnaires is to collect information about controls. Are those controls succeeding or failing? Are they in place? Are they not? Do they need improvement? So it's that concept, and it's not about questionnaires. It's about how do we collect the data that we need to answer those questions we have. Because I guarantee you, if you send a whole 800 questions to a vendor and ask them to fill it out, they're going to come back. Yes, they're going to look wonderful. They're going to have an A if that's the only thing you look at because, well...
Wait. Are you saying people lie?
No, they don't lie. They
don't
give their
know.
best opinion.
Yeah.
Okay. You know what they say about opinions,
It's,
all right?
It's not an outright lie, but it's a good indicator when a questionnaire comes back. In the old days, if it came back 100% yes is in the way it was supposed to be, that there was a problem.
Right. When I ran programs, if you came back with a perfect score, I was much more worried than if you came back with a bad score.
Exactly, because everybody has problems, but it's getting away from that mentality of sending out questionnaires, and I love it today. Well, we're going to automate that for you. We have an AI agent that's going to do all this for you, and I think, well, that's stupid. Why are you going to automate something that has no value? Find a better way to get the information than
right.
Just because I'm going to automate and let the vendor go out to a website and fill things in and let AI help him as an assistant, that doesn't mean that the process is any better. It's an automation of a process that needs to change.
Right.
That's the
so
point.
You and I have talked about this old Dilbert cartoon a bunch of years ago, right? Where the pointy-haired boss said, so what you're saying is I get ISO 9000. All I have to do is say I do this, even if it's bad. Yeah, right? Automating bad just automates bad, and then you end up with this black box, which comes back to the whole thing we started off with, which is we're relying on this one thing. So Ferhat, from your perspective, as this amazing researcher, how do you foresee or anticipate sort of closing the gap and getting people? Because I think we can't hit them with the whole thing all at once, right? We have to pull in little bits and pieces and go, have you thought about this? Have you thought about adding this? Would that change the way you made a decision? So what do you see kind of the future look like? And when we get that pushback, no, we're good with questionnaires. How do you fight that?
Well, now it's my turn to defend the questionnaire. By the way, you said amazing researcher. I have an amazing research team, just to say it out loud. And what we realize is that, questionnaires, they have their place, especially in one-in-time annual assessments. You need to, start somewhere. You need to collect information from inside. Otherwise, you need to tap into their own resources that most of the vendors will not allow to do that, right? You cannot directly pull data from their own systems. So you need inside information, and the questionnaires is the way. But it shouldn't be about managing the questionnaires, because our goal is the managing the risk. But the questionnaire industry has become somewhere that you start to manage the questionnaires, how many questions they answer or how many they didn't answer. I should resend the questions and get the answers. So those things take time, but it's managing the questionnaire, not managing the risk. So we need to change that perspective first. We need to manage the risk. And at some point, sometimes vendor, they don't know, and it's very understandable. If in case of a high profile incident, if you say that, hey, there's a ransomware group targeting this Strix vulnerability, do you have that problem? So some vendors, they have thousands of assets, they don't have a proper digital inventory. It will take too much time for them to look into those assets and find that vulnerability if it exists or not. They might not have a proper patch management, policy, and we have seen that a lot. We did an amazing analysis on the vulnerabilities in the supply chain, and we saw that thousands of vendors, they are still exposed. Some of the vulnerabilities exploited by ransomware groups or other
It's amazing
groups.
after all this time we still haven't fixed patch management.
I mean, that's
Right?
it.
It's basic blocking and tackling, and we are still not good at it.
Well, that's a very difficult problem. In 2024,
Well, fix that.
40,000 CVs published in 2024 in 1 year. Forget about the supply chain. Even for yourself, you cannot manage all those vulnerabilities, right? You need to prioritize somehow. But there are only 781 of them exploited in the wild. So you need to give that risk intelligence. Which one can be exploited by the threat actors? And you need to provide that risk intelligence to the vendor. Because instead of asking question, hey, do you have this problem? Now you are saying that, hey, we are using a continuous monitoring tool, and they said that on this asset you might have this problem, this vulnerability, and this is how you remediate that problem. Then they will appreciate it because you are helping them to be better. But if you ask questions, you are not the only one asking that question. There are so many of their clients asking the same questions, and the industry unintentionally creating these small interrogation rooms on the vendor side, and then they become defensive. They said, oh, we don't have that problem, without even looking at it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you nailed something, and this is something I've been saying. Yes, our job is to make third-party risk management easier for our customer, but the way we do that is by making it easier for their vendors. And that piece of research you talked about, I actually just wrote a blog on it that really talks about how do we sort of parse that down, get from that 781 down to the 24, 25 that matter? Because I don't know about you, but if I'm running a program and one of my customers comes and says, you need to patch 5,000 things, and another customer comes and says, you need to patch 25, I know which one I'm going to do. Right?
Well, it's even more. And I got to go back to your patch management question. I'm going to defend the CIOs out there. Everybody thinks that, okay, so you have all your systems and the patches come out. And, why aren't you applying all those patches within the 30 days or whatever your patch management policy is? Because if you're not doing it, you're the problem. And well, no, they're not. Because their number one goal is to have those systems operational.
Right.
And those patches may break something. And the challenge is a lot of third-party risk managers don't really get that. And so they'll stop with the fact, oh, well, you have a vulnerability, you have to fix it. And they've never asked.
We told them to fix it. If they didn't,
Right, it's their
hands
fault.
off.
But they've never asked the question, okay, well, why haven't you fixed it? And there may be reasons. And do you have mitigating controls in place until you can do that? So it's that context you talked about at the beginning of the episode. They only look at, oh, it's you don't have that patched. Fail. And it creates that friction between the buyers and the vendors. And you have to
we end up with
beyond
that. I'm going to wag my finger at you, and if you don't do what I say, I'm going to wag my finger very aggressively next time. No one is interested in that. So, all right. So this has been a great conversation. Final thoughts. One piece of advice you have out there for all of our listeners. How do they transcend this approach that has not worked? I'll actually start with you, Ferhat. One thing. Only one.
Continuous risk intelligence. That's the key, right? You just cannot rely on the scores or questionnaires solely. You need additional piece, which is the continuous risk intelligence, that will help you to manage the risk on your vendors. If you know the risk, you can make decisions based on that, whether the vendor can do something about it or not. At least you know that you have that risk.
Bob?
Think strategically, not tactically. You only ask for one thing, that's all you're getting.
You know, the future is uncertain. I think we have a lot of really cool stuff coming. I think people out there need to understand that this is a huge ecosystem problem, not just about us, not just about you. It's a problem we all need to work together to solve.
Most vendor cyber risk tools bury you in dashboards. Black Kite gives you Signal. Our platform translates technical risk into business language so you can actually show the board what's at stake. No fluff, no black box, just clarity. Want a risk report your CFO will understand? Head to blackkite.com to learn more.
So there's a ton of great research out there that really talks about these problems that we have discussed. And one that I want to get your reaction on today, IBM Ponemon, they do great research every year. The report this year indicates that a breach in the US averages about $10.2 million, right? And if you add in the concept of shadow AI, which is a problem that we are facing, it goes up by almost $700,000. So we're talking about a 7% sort of push up. What are your thoughts on that? Is it getting worse? Is it getting better?
My thoughts are...
And should we care, really?
Well, no, we shouldn't, because my thoughts are that when I was CISO for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the Ponemon research was absolutely amazing because I could use it to get more budget, because it could spread FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
No FUD.
No FUD, yeah, but it was good back then. And I think it's kind of the same thing today because a lot of research is based on surveys. And the research that I like to consume and use and make decisions is research that's actually based on real data. And some of the reports that I've seen, I haven't seen any recently that talk about the added cost of AI. And, you know, it's curious how they came up with that. I haven't seen behind the scenes how that came.
Well, you know what they say, lies, damn lies, and statistics, right?
Yeah, what, 70% of statistics are made up on the spot?
Yes.
Yeah,
well, I think Abraham Lincoln said 75% of the stuff you see on the internet is made up.
Yeah, that's probably accurate.
So Ferhat, as a researcher, any thoughts on that? I mean, you know, it comes back to the average of averages, right?
Yeah.
Right? $10.2 million, okay, it's a lot of money, but what if you're having one or two $300 million sort of company ending things, and then everybody else is suffering from $50 a pop?
And it really depends on how you calculate the cost of a data breach, right? In our third-party data breach analysis, we realized that two-thirds of the data breach caused by third parties are because of ransomware. And when ransomware hit the supply chain, the impact is more than what you think of, because it's business disruption and interruption over there that you don't know how to calculate the cost, or even if you know, the calculation takes time. You will hear about the exact numbers maybe 2 years later, 5 years later, because there's also usually a lawsuit, comes with that. So it really depends on how you calculate the cost. But I like that they added the shadow AI part, and that part is just the beginning that we are seeing. We will see more and more because right now, employees, they use AI without informing their managers. They just find something on GitHub.
That never happens.
Nope,
Yeah,
never. Nope.
The recent Disney attack, right? That was like one of the employee, he decided to download an image generation AI tool from GitHub. It was an open source tool, but it was actually a malicious code that cost them a lot of money. So it really, it's literally the beginning, and we will see more and more data breach costs related to shadow AI.
Right. And I think you hit on something really interesting. So there's a story that we've seen circulating around lately about a company called KNP Logistics out of the UK, otherwise known as the Knights of Old. Well, they got hit with ransomware 2+ years ago. They ended up going out of business. And for whatever reason, now the stories are kind of bubbling back up in the news. It took 2 years, and everyone says, well, it's a shame they went out of business. And yes, it is a shame. But you know who it's really a shame for? Anyone that was waiting for their trucks to show up with raw material, or anybody that's shipping product. And one of our customers in our customer advisory board, who I won't name, basically said that ransomware incident cost them $5 million, right? That's real money as a result of a company who had pretty good policy, pretty good program. One person did something they were not supposed to do. So I think the takeaway there is research is useful, but we, again, have to apply context, right? We need to understand where these things are sitting.
If you're enjoying the show, we'd love for you to leave us a rating on Spotify. It helps more TPM professionals find the show and join the conversation. And it gives Bob another reason to rant next week. Just kidding, kinda.
This next segment is called Love It or Hate It. So I am going to read 3 statements, and then we're all going to vote, love it or hate it, and then we'll talk about them. All right?
Okay.
First statement. When it comes to third-party risk management, transparency matters more than accuracy. Well, that was boring. We all love it. We all love it. All right. Second one, most third-party risk management programs are just theater.
Well, yep.
You can't change when you see ours.
Well, hold on though.
I was trying to figure out which one was
risk management theater.
You love the fact that they're theater? Because I hate the fact that they're theater.
I love it. Puts us in business.
All right. And then the third one, you should always share vendor risk reports with your vendors. Hate. All right.
Okay.
So the first one, transparency, we all agree. So let's just skip that one. So let's talk a little bit about the theater element. And I think security in general is filled with theater, right? We all spend a lot of time in airports. I understand that we actually no longer have to take our shoes off at the airports, all because one person tried to light his shoes on fire and failed, right? So what is it that is, what's problematic about this whole concept of theater? Like why is it an issue?
Well, I said I love it, right? Didn't I? Yeah, I mean, it has to be a theater. Like you need to put some drama on it to get what you want, right? Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult. If you just put the plain facts and data out there, you cannot convince the executives to do what you want to do. That's why you need some drama on it.
All right. So you looked at it differently than I did, I think. And actually, I think your take is much better. And I mean, you guys know I do a lot of talking about communicating IT risk to non-IT. And I always talk about looking at the emotional piece. So I like that. So what do you think? What are your thoughts, Bob, on security theater?
Well, your take is Bruce Schneier's definition, the airport, and but I totally get that. And sometimes, well, you have to do it because you have nothing else. But I like your definition, and I think it's the same thing. Is that you have to be able to tell a story, and I think telling a story is theater, but telling a good story, one that has accuracy, one that has meat, one that has the ability to reduce risk. That's the value.
Right. And I mean, storytelling is sort of a pet project of mine. I've been talking about it for a long time. And I think the key thing is we need to know why we're telling the story, right? We need to understand what is the moral of the story? What are we trying to get to? So I like that. All right. And then the third one, so we had a little bit of disagreement here. You should always share vendor risk reports with your vendors. So.
Yeah, I said love it. I think we need to share it no matter what. I know that there are cases that the vendor will not like it, or there is nothing that they can do.
You're telling people their baby's ugly.
Yeah, it's how you narrate the story, right? It depends on that. But still, I think full transparency helps to improve the cybersecurity posture of the whole ecosystem.
So I should have held up like this,
Right.
It depends.
Maybe.
Because, from your perspective, and my problem is I'm looking at risk reports that our company create. And those, you can share those all day long because they have accuracy, they're valuable, they point to problems, they have solutions. But there's a lot of folks in the space where those risk reports, they cause more churn and they have no value. So
Right.
that's the
Right,
problem.
because the risk reports, they tend to get handed off and then they get distributed out without the context of where it came from and why. And then, of course, you end up with an IT or a security ops person who's like, well, what do you mean I'm not doing my job?
Yeah, and,
Right.
and again, it's a lot of times it's not a risk report; it's more about a vulnerability report, and
Right.
that we talked about that with patch management.
Ad nauseum.
Yeah,
And there are some risk reports out there. They have so many false positives that the vendor has to chase all these false positives or convince the person who sent the report that, hey, these are false positives. So that's why I'm coming back to the first point, that transparency matters. Hey, I'm sending you this finding, but my confidence on that finding is not that high. Just to know, so that you know the transparency. And in that case, it's okay to share, but without context, without putting the transparency, just sharing the risk report, it doesn't help.
And that confidence level, to me, that's so valuable, because there's a lot in the industry when they say something's wrong. Well, we said it's wrong, and that they're probably wrong about that.
Right. Well, if you say it with a lot of confidence, people tend to believe you. And
Exactly.
I learned that a long time ago working in retail.
Yeah.
All right. So some things we love, some things we hate.
Yep.
Perfect.
It's life.
It's like,
In the next episode, we're tackling a big one: why your risk reports get ignored every single time. If you've ever handed a scorecard to a business unit and watched their eyes glaze over, you want to be here for this one.
Remember, cybersecurity doesn't thrive in the shadows. It demands daylight. Until next time.